When Michael surprised me with a trip to Italy for our 10th anniversary, I should have felt grateful. Most women would kill to have a husband as thoughtful and generous as him. And for a while, I played my part. I smiled, I kissed his cheek, I posted the airport selfies with captions like, "Lucky me 2 hearts." But deep down, I was exhausted. From the marriage, from pretending everything was fine, from this image of a perfect couple I no longer recognized. It wasn't always like this. When we first got married, Michael made me laugh so hard I'd cry. We used to sit in diners for hours, splitting fries, and making up life stories for strangers. But somewhere between the 3rd job promotion and my 2nd miscarriage, that warmth disappeared. He got quiet. Not mean or cruel, just distant. He loved me, I know he did. But he stopped seeing me. Italy, I told myself, was our chance. A reset. New air, new food, new memories. He planned everything, the flight, the hotels, the itinerary. "Amalfi Coast is magical," he'd said. "You'll love it." On our 2nd day, we joined a small group tour of Ravello. That's where I met Luca. He was our guide, dark curls, sun-warmed skin, a smile like he'd memorized the effect it had on people. He introduced himself with a flourish and said, "I am here to show you the beauty you didn't know you were missing." The others chuckled. I did too, but something fluttered inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time. Luca had a way of making everything sound like a secret. He'd lower his voice just slightly when he leaned in to describe the legend behind a stone villa or the hidden symbolism in a fountain sculpture. When he spoke to me directly, usually to clarify something about the tour or check if I needed water, it felt intimate. Not overt, not yet, but I noticed how his gaze lingered a second longer on my necklace or the way I tucked my hair behind my ear. Michael was too busy checking our GPS trail to notice. That night at the hotel, I brought it up casually. "Luca really knows his stuff." Michael nodded without looking up from his phone. "Yeah, he's good." And that was it. No jealousy. No curiosity. Just more quiet. He kissed my forehead and turned off the light. I stared at the ceiling, Luca's voice still whispering facts about lemon groves and Roman aqueducts in my head. The next morning, I slipped out early for a coffee. I hadn't planned on running into Luca near the piazza, but maybe some part of me had hoped I would. He recognized me instantly and smiled. "You're up early," he said, taking the seat beside me without asking. "I wanted to explore a bit before the crowds." "Always the best way," he said. "Before the world wakes up and starts pretending." I laughed, unsure if he meant anything by it. But that sentence stayed with me. We ended up walking for over an hour. He pointed out his favorite bakery, a tiny bookstore that sold secondhand English novels, and a garden that tourists rarely found. I told him about my work in HR, how I once dreamed of writing children's books, how Michael and I met in college. He listened, not just politely, but like he was memorizing every word. When I got back, Michael was annoyed. "You could have left a note." "I didn't think you'd even notice," I snapped. He blinked at me, confused. "Of course I noticed." But he didn't ask where I'd been. He never did. By the 4th day, it had become a routine. I'd wake early, tell Michael I wanted to journal or sketch, and meet Luca near the fountain. Sometimes he brought me fresh pastries, other times we just walked, talking about everything and nothing. I knew what I was doing. I knew the line I was approaching. But I felt alive again. Beautiful. Like someone worth chasing. It happened on the 6th day. We were in Positano, the sun beginning to dip behind the cliffs. Luca had just finished guiding a group of American tourists, and I stayed behind under the pretense of wanting to take more photos. We stood at the edge of a terrace overlooking the ocean. "You look different today," he said. Is that good or bad? Different is honest, he replied. I like honest. He stepped closer. I didn't move away. His hand grazed mine, lightly, deliberately. When I looked up, he kissed me. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't impulsive. It felt like the answer to a question I didn't know I'd been asking for years. Afterward, I walked back to our hotel slowly, heart pounding, guilt rising like a wave I couldn't outrun. Michael was sitting at the balcony, sipping wine. He smiled when he saw me. There you are, he said. I was starting to wonder if you got lost. I'm fine, I replied, my voice hoarse. That night, he made love to me for the first time in weeks. It should have made me feel closer to him. Instead, I felt like I was betraying both of them. And I knew this wasn't over. The days after the kiss blurred together, not because nothing happened, but because everything did. Luca and I never talked about what had happened, not directly. But every glance, every brush of skin in passing, carried the weight of that moment on the terrace in Positano. I started craving those stolen hours with him like they were oxygen. I'd wake with Michael, play the dutiful wife over breakfast, then invent reasons to slip away. A sketching class, a writing session, an impromptu solo hike. Michael didn't press me. He seemed grateful I was smiling again, even if it wasn't because of him. One afternoon, I returned to the hotel room to find Michael studying our itinerary. He looked up and smiled, his expression almost childlike. I was thinking we could take that cooking class tomorrow together, he said. You mentioned you wanted to learn how to make risotto the real way. It caught me off guard. Yeah, I did. He walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. It's been nice here, hasn't it? I feel like we're reconnecting. I smiled and nodded, but I felt something twist in my stomach. Guilt, maybe. Or the realization that I had one foot already out the door, while he was trying to patch a crack I had already crawled through. The cooking class never happened. Luca texted me that night. There's a private boat leaving from Maui early tomorrow. My friend owes me a favor. Meet me at the dock. No one will know. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. Michael fell asleep quickly that night. I watched his chest rise and fall, tried to remember how it used to feel lying next to him when everything was easy. And then I got up, quietly dressed, and slipped out the door with my sandals in hand. The boat rocked gently as the early morning tide lapped against the hull. The sun hadn't yet burned through the morning mist, and everything looked soft, dreamlike. Luca was already aboard, standing with his arms crossed, the breeze tousling his curls. I didn't think you'd come, he said, not quite smiling. Neither did I. He offered me his hand, and I stepped on board. The ride was quiet at first. I sat near the bow, watching the cliffs go by. Small fishing boats bobbed in the distance, their nets slung lazily over the sides. The wind tugged at my scarf, and I let it go, watching it sail into the water like a flag of surrender. Eventually, Luca sat beside me. You don't have to say anything, he said. I just wanted time with you, without schedules or secrets. But everything about this is a secret. He shrugged. Doesn't mean it's not real. I turned to look at him, and for a second, I hated him. Hated how easily he unraveled the life I had spent 10 years building. Hated how he made me feel seen and wanted, because I shouldn't have needed him to feel that way. We anchored near a hidden cove, the kind that doesn't appear in travel guides. The water was impossibly clear. Luca handed me a towel and nodded toward the stern. You came all this way. You should swim. I didn't bring a suit. You don't need one. He jumped in, his laughter echoing off the rocks. I stood at the edge of the boat for a long time, the sea shimmering below. Then I peeled off my dress and dove in. We floated together, weightless in the salt and silence. When he pulled me toward him, I didn't resist. There were no words. Only hands, mouths, breath. It was clumsy and desperate and beautiful. And when it was over, we lay side by side on the sun-warmed deck, not speaking. I returned to the hotel just after noon. Michael was at the rooftop cafe, sipping espresso and reading. He looked up, relieved. "There you are," he said. "I thought maybe you'd gotten lost again." "In a way," I replied, and kissed him on the cheek. He didn't ask where I'd been. I didn't tell him. The next few days passed in a haze of dual lives. Mornings were for Luca, for the secret glances and hurried touches in alleyways and between tour groups. Evenings were for Michael, who had started holding my hand again and watching me like he was falling in love for the first time, just as I was falling out. The worst part was, I didn't feel like I was betraying him anymore. I felt like I was finally breathing. The day before we were supposed to leave Amalfi, Luca took me to a clifftop garden no tourist ever found on their own. We sat on a crumbling stone bench overlooking the sea. He pulled a small notebook from his satchel and handed it to me. "I wrote these after I met you," he said. "They're just thoughts. Poems, maybe." I flipped through them. His handwriting was hurried, passionate. The words were raw, aching. "You're not just someone passing through, Leah," he said. "You're more than this trip." I didn't know what to say. He reached for my hand. "Come with me." I blinked. "What?" "Stay. Or come back." Leave him. The weight of it all pressed down on me. The sun, the sea, his eyes, the life I had built, the life I'd broken. "I can't," I whispered. "Why?" "Because I don't know who I am without him." Luca didn't argue. He just stood, nodded, and walked away. That night, Michael and I had our final dinner on the Amalfi Coast. We sat across from each other at a candlelit table, clinking glasses of wine and smiling for pictures. He told me how much the trip meant to him. How he'd seen a spark in me again. "Maybe we should do this more often," he said. "Travel. Explore." I nodded. "Did you find what you were looking for here?" he asked. The question hung in the air. "Yes," I said quietly. "I did." And I meant it. We landed back in Chicago late on a Monday afternoon, the Amalfi sun still faintly glowing on our skin, as if our bodies hadn't gotten the memo that the trip was over. As the plane taxied, Michael leaned across the armrest and whispered, "This was good for us." I nodded, offering a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The guilt I'd carried on the flight home felt different now, heavier, settled. I'd imagined the weight would lift the moment we left Italy, like it was tied to the place itself. But it had come with me, threaded into the folds of my clothes, nestled between the pages of Luca's notebook now hidden in the lining of my suitcase. When we walked through our front door, the house felt smaller. Or maybe it was that I felt bigger. Not in ego or pride, just changed. Like I'd cracked open, and now everything around me seemed oddly misaligned. I resumed my routines. Laundry, emails, grocery runs. Michael went back to work, diving into conference calls and spreadsheets. He started cooking more, leaving little notes on the fridge with "tonight's menu," or offering to pick up my favorite wine on the way home. He was trying. And in the quiet, I tried too. For a few weeks, we existed in this strange middle space, like our marriage had been set back to neutral, as if we were dating again. We laughed sometimes. We even made love, more tentatively than before. And for brief moments, I'd almost convinced myself that it was enough. But it wasn't. Luca never contacted me after that last day in the garden. No texts, no emails. I suppose he'd made his peace. Or maybe he knew what I hadn't yet admitted to myself, that I wasn't staying for love, but for fear for the comfort of routine, for the safety of being someone's wife instead of someone uncertain. Still, I thought about him. Often. I'd wake at 3 a.m. from dreams of lemon trees and foreign hands on my skin. Sometimes, I'd reread the notebook when Michael wasn't home, fingers trembling at the rawness of his words. They felt written to a version of me I wasn't sure I could ever be again. Then came the envelope. I found it one morning, wedged into our mailbox between bills and a catalog. No return address. The postmark read Italy. Inside was a single photo, me and Luca on the boat, laughing, windblown, completely unaware we were being watched. I stared at it, breath caught in my chest. My heart pounded, not from fear of discovery, but from the brutal truth captured in that frame. I had looked so alive. Michael was in the shower. I sat at the kitchen table, photo in one hand, coffee in the other, and for the first time since our return, I allowed myself to really ask the question. What if I left? Not for Luca. Not for another romance. Just for myself. What if I stopped trying to be the person Michael needed, or Luca longed for, and started figuring out who I actually was? I was 38. I had spent 10 years in a marriage where I played every role: partner, planner, peacekeeper. I had tasted something different, something reckless and selfish, yes, but also liberating. I couldn't unknow it now. That night, I sat Michael down. He looked worried before I even spoke. He'd always been more intuitive than I gave him credit for. "I've been lying to you," I began. His face paled. "I met someone in Italy." He didn't say anything at first. Just exhaled slowly, like he'd been bracing for this moment. "You slept with him?" I nodded. He closed his eyes and leaned back against the couch. I waited for yelling, accusations, the storm. But all he said was, "Why? I didn't plan it. I wasn't looking for it," I said. But it made me realize how invisible I'd become. Not just to you. To myself. He was quiet for a long time. Then, almost softly, "I thought we were fixing things." "I know," I said. "And you've been trying. But I think I was already gone before we got on the plane." His eyes welled, and I hated myself for it. I wanted to take it back, not the affair, but this moment of shattering the man who once made me laugh until I cried. "So what now?" he asked. "I think we need time. Space. I don't know what that looks like yet. I'm not saying I'm running off to anyone else. I'm saying I need to find out who I am when I'm not trying to save something that's already gone." He nodded slowly, then got up and left the room. I moved into a rental the following month. Small, modest, enough for just me. I kept my job but switched apartments, craving something unfamiliar. On weekends, I sat in coffee shops and actually wrote essays, fragments, beginnings of stories. I didn't tell anyone about Luca. Not my friends, not my sister. He wasn't a chapter one wanted to reread. He was a mirror. And I'd already seen what I needed to see. Michael and I are still figuring it out. Some weeks we meet for lunch, talk like old friends. Other times we don't speak at all. It's not easy. It's messy and painful. But it's honest. And I think that's the beginning of something better. Not a happy ending, but maybe a real one.